I'm not going to lie to you. I packed a lot into this sermon. I probably shouldn't have done it, but I just couldn't resist. The connection between the themes was too strong in my mind for me to try not to talk about them all. So I'm going to attempt to explain my understanding of 3 themes today and how they connect in less than 20 minutes. All right, hold on, here we go. The 3 themes are individualism, beloved community, and salvation. Here we go. Let's start with individualism. After all, if we're going to go beyond individualism, as the title of the sermon suggests, we need to get to it and through it first. So our first task in understanding individualism is to clarify that individualism is not individuality. Individuality is the unique combination of personality traits and characteristics, of our skills and our talents and our tastes and our preferences that make each of us who we are. Individuality shapes our identities by helping us understand who we are in relation to each other and to the world. Individualism, on the other hand, is an idea or a philosophy or a way of life that gives utmost value to the autonomy and the ability of each individual person. It prizes self-reliance and independence. And it's not surprising to see this idea and where it runs through Unitarian Universalism. Individualism shows up most prominently and often proudly in our 4th principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Now, I'll admit that this was the principle that drew me to Unitarian Universalism. Having grown up in a Protestant church that professed a God belief that I just couldn't quite agree with, I found my first Unitarian Universalist community refreshingly open and accepting of my theological questions. We're pretty proud of this, aren't we? When it comes to religious thought and theological thought, we certainly uphold individualism, promoting the idea that we are each reliant on ourselves to shape our own beliefs about God. And it's no wonder individualism runs deep in our history. The Puritans, who are our religious ancestors, placed a heavy moral responsibility on the individual. Ralph Waldo Emerson, a Unitarian minister, is well known for his essay, Self-Reliance, which touts the merits of individualism over conformity and over dependence. And then the humanist debate among Unitarians in the early 1900s played with the idea of removing God from the moral equation entirely, placing even more responsibility on the individual. Individualism is an interwoven part of the fabric of Unitarian Universalist culture. Now here's the problem. Individualism is hurting us more than it's helping us. In an article from the UU World magazine called The End of iChurch, Reverend Dr. Fred Muir agrees that we are being held back by a pervasive and disruptive commitment to individualism. He continues and says, for all its appeal and its influence in American culture, individualism is not sustaining. Individualism will not serve the greater good, a principle to which Unitarian Universalists have also committed ourselves. There is little to nothing about the ideology and theology of individualism that encourages people to work and to live together, to create and support institutions that serve common aspirations and beloved principles. And another Unitarian Universalist minister agrees. In a sermon on individualism, Reverend John Popendrew said, "There is a vast underworld of people who have lived with the fantasy of the Lone Ranger and found it to be hell. For hell is the absence of relationship, the ultimate disconnection. So Reverends Muir and Poppendrew both seem to agree that individualism is a problem, and both think so for the same reason. It ignores our need for connection and human relationship. Which brings us to our second theme, beloved community. Now, in my last sermon, exactly a month ago, I gave a pretty thorough description of beloved community. So this time through, I'm just going to give you the short version. Beloved community is based in covenant and relationships. We have chosen to build our religion, our faith tradition, on covenant, not creed. And so when we opt for covenant as the foundation of our faith tradition, then we are making relationship the cornerstone of our community. This means that every time we come together is an opportunity to build the beloved community. Beloved community is justice-focused. When we are living into beloved community, we can recognize that the common good is truly for the good of all, and we work to bring it about in this life and in this world that we all share. UU minister Mark Morrison Reed says that the central task of religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. And once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. And the active agent in the creation of beloved community is love. The kind of deep, universal love found in beloved community. This is what Martin Luther King referred to as agape. He said agape is love seeking to preserve and create community. It is insistence on community even when one seeks to break it. Agape is a willingness to go to any length to restore community. Now, this kind of love is essential for creating and sustaining beloved community. So, to recap beloved community, it is based in covenant and relationships, it is justice-focused, and it is built with and out of love. So we've talked about individualism as theme number 1. We've reviewed beloved community as theme 2. Are you all still with me? Great. That means it's time for theme 3, salvation. Some of you may not like this word, salvation. Maybe it's too churchy, too religious. I'm sure that more than a few of you think that it just doesn't belong here. But I ask that you hear me out. We can conceive of our lives having more than one dimension. For example, we can talk about caring for ourselves physically, and we can talk about caring for ourselves emotionally, recognizing them as two distinct aspects, although they're certainly related. We can talk of having a social life, and we have spiritual lives to cultivate and care for as well, although we often have a harder time articulating what this entails. So let me ask, are we only ever threatened in the physical sense? Are only our physical lives ever threatened and therefore capable of being saved? Or can we admit vulnerability in the other aspects as well? If we can conceive of our lives having different aspects or different dimensions, then why should we be resistant to the idea of our lives being saved in any of them? Now, clearly, our physical lives are saved when we avoid a car accident or when someone performs the Heimlich maneuver to prevent us from choking. And maybe we can look at therapy and counseling as a way to save ourselves emotionally. But what does saving the spiritual life look like? What could spiritual salvation mean, even if we don't believe in heaven, hell, or an afterlife? What does salvation look like in this life? All right, this is the fun part. This is where the three themes start to come together. So individualism, and not individuality, mind you, but individualism is smothering us. It's holding us back, and it is causing the whole world to suffer. Because individualism tells us that we don't need one another. And absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. We absolutely need each other. Individualism is the problem, and beloved community is the answer. And I'll even go a step further and say it's not just the answer, it is our salvation. Beloved community saves us from individualism. Beloved community is our salvation from individualism. Here's the truth. We cannot save ourselves. Not every time, anyway. Certainly, we can do things to become strong and resilient people. We can exercise and work out to make ourselves fast and strong physically. We can learn to get in touch with our emotions, to check in with ourselves about how we are feeling and what our instincts are telling us. Socially, we can learn how to win friends and influence people. I hear there's a book about that. And spiritually, we can engage in meditation and many other forms of spiritual practice that help us stay grounded and centered. But ultimately, we will face threats in all of these aspects of our lives that are too big, that are too daunting, and too overwhelming for us to face alone. The world is bigger than even the biggest and the strongest of us, and it can throw obstacles and tragedies greater than we are capable of overcoming. It can impose grief and loss upon us that is beyond our ability to cope. And this is as it should be. For we are not meant to be solitary beings. We need one another. When we're able to get past the social narrative of rugged individualism, of the solitary hero and the self-made human, we can recognize how our egos are holding us down. We can still keep our individuality, but we need to let go of the individualism. Because it's this adherence to individualism that prevents us from building the beloved community. So I ask again, what does salvation look like in this life? The answer is, it looks like beloved community. We have to move beyond individualism because our salvation is in the beloved community. And this is the life-saving, life-affirming message of Unitarian Universalism. In our current political and social climate, our congregation is growing, and we're not the only one. Many Unitarian Universalist congregations are experiencing a growth in membership right now. And some say it's about hope, but I think it's even deeper than that. I think it's because we feel powerless when we're alone. We feel like the world is moving in the wrong direction, and there's nothing that we can do about it. And we're right. There is nothing any of us can do about it alone. But together, in community, we can react, respond, and resist. Alone, we cannot save the world, but together, we can save each other. Our salvation lies in each other's hands. So when people come to our Unitarian Universalist communities, they're looking for more than hope. In fact, I'd say they already have hope, because that's what brought them in the door. They already had hope that the world could be better than it is, and they came here seeking a community that could help them deliver what they hope for: salvation, their own and the world's. Now, the compelling part of building beloved community is that we get to both be saved and we get to do the saving. We get to serve, and we are served by our belonging here. We can be blessed, and we can be a blessing. The beloved community requires that we go beyond individualism. We have to recognize the limits of what any of us can accomplish on our own. Self-reliance is a myth. Have you ever actually seen anyone pull themselves up by their bootstraps? I was going to demonstrate, but it was really embarrassing when I did it in front of the mirror, so. Anyway, it can't be done. I can't save myself. I need you. I need all of you. I need this beloved community to pick me up when I'm down. I need this beloved community to orient me time and again to my purpose, to the meaningful work that I'm called to do here as a minister. I need you to call me back into covenant when I fall out. And I do, and I will. I need you to help me stay justice-focused. And I need your agape love, the foundation of beloved community. You are my salvation. Or in the words of Alexi Murdoch, my salvation lies in your love. May it be so.